Hi, welcome back to Election Night 2020. I'm Chris Castile at the Oklahoman, Oklahoman.com with my colleague Kayla Branch. We are going to talk a little bit of state and county race right now in this update. Kayla's been covering historic sheriff's race in Oklahoma County, but she's also been, our reporter's been all over State Question 805, which is the question that, about whether Oklahoma takes the next step in criminal justice reform. It's been highly controversial. You've probably seen the ads. Kayla, how's it doing? It's not looking too good for 805 tonight.
It is not looking good, and it hasn't been looking good all night. The latest report that I got from the state election board was about over 80% of precincts reporting statewide, and there were about 60% of voters who had opposed the measure, and that's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of votes against State Question 805, dividing the yes and no. So I don't see it passing tonight. I'm not sure if AP is going to call it yet, but it is not looking good.
It's going down. And you had a story this weekend. The Yes on 805 campaign filed its first campaign finance report where they named where all the money was coming from, their donors, and it's millions of dollars. And it was primarily who?
The ACLU, based out of New York, and then a group called FWD.US, so Forward US, which has its focus on immigration and criminal justice reform nationally. And we're just talking about that being funded by Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook. So a lot of national, out-of-state money coming in. I think it was over $6 million from the last year. And like you mentioned, State Question 805, the Yes campaign, they spent millions of dollars on TV commercials, on mailers, on different town halls, and they've really tried to, they've said, educate voters and drum up support, but it did not work.
And we have some familiar figures behind 805 that are really have become very involved in criminal justice in the last few years. Chris Steele, the former House Speaker, Sue Ann Arnell, the foundation, the philanthropist here. But there were some big names on the other side. I mean, Governor Stitt, Attorney General Mike Hunter, Frank former Governor Frank Keating. There were a lot of voices on the other side of 805. And what were they? What concerns were they expressing about it?
So the main concern that they expressed, and that I heard just from regular folks too, was the way that the state question classified nonviolent crimes. So it's pretty technical, but essentially there were crimes that people felt should be violent and should be eligible for sentence enhancements, including domestic violence, animal cruelty, some child trafficking laws, some home burglary charges, that if State Question 805 passed, they would no longer be eligible to have their sentences enhanced. So if you were a repeat offender, currently a prosecutor or a judge can say, oh, you've done this 4 or 5 times, so we're going to go beyond the maximum time allowed in state law to send you to prison, and we're going to double it.
And that's called an enhanced sentence.
An enhanced sentence, exactly. So for certain crimes, that would end with State Question 805, and people were not happy with that list of crimes. So that was really the main one, but also it's a state question that would be a constitutional amendment, and so it would be really hard to change in the future, and that was mentioned as well.
Right. Now, I don't know if I don't remember, was the big state question on criminal justice reform passed 4 years ago called 780, was that constitutional or not?
I believe that it was.
Okay.
And state lawmakers have found that was a state question that changed drug offenses and possession of drug offenses.
So they weren't felonies anymore.
Exactly.
Right.
And state lawmakers since then have tried to kind of tinker with that. There was some talk.
They made it retroactive, right?
Yes. And there was some talk at the state capitol this year about do we change state law on how close you can be to a school or different things where it kind of would have changed the impact of those state questions. So lawmakers can still find their way around constitutional amendments. It just is more difficult.
So we know this. We know Oklahoma is a very high incarceration state. At times it's been number one in its incarceration rate. It's still number one for women, I believe. Voters and lawmakers, policymakers have taken steps to reduce that, but 805 doesn't look like it's going to be the next step, and they're going to have to look another direction, I guess.
Yeah.
Fine. So
they'll have to find something else. Not sure what it'll be. I've asked the opposition campaign, if not 805, then what? And they haven't really said what next. So it'll be interesting to follow up as this continues, like you said, to be a top issue in the state.
Sure. Speaking of criminal justice, you're following the sheriff's race. Historic race because both candidates are African American. Tommy Johnson III, the Republican who knocked off incumbent P.D. Taylor in the primary, and Waylon Cubitt, the Democrat. How does that race look right now?
So that race is pretty tight right now. And last time I checked, there were 45% of Oklahoma County precincts reporting a Democrat. Waylon Cubitt is up at 52% of votes, and Tommy Johnson is at 47%. So it's a tight race. It's been pretty tight all night, though early voting did have Cubitt up pretty far ahead. I think he was at 59% and Johnson was at 40%. And I think this is kind of to be expected. There wasn't ever, a real clear person that I thought was going to come out on top. They're both new, and they have done some pretty extensive campaigning over the last several weeks. So
it'll be interesting, and to talk about Oklahoma County, that's one of the races, few races with suspense here right now, and that's the 5th District congressional race, which includes most of Oklahoma County, not all of it, and we're watching that carefully. And as Kayla just mentioned, in the sheriff's race, the early vote in Oklahoma County came in heavily for Democratic U.S. Rep. Kendra Horn. That is narrowed considerably as a lot of the precincts have been counted. It's narrowing still as the areas in North Oklahoma County, like Edmond and North Oklahoma City, the more conservative parts of the county are being counted. So that race could come down to the wire, watching that carefully. So other big ones were called early. President Trump, of course, wins the red state of Oklahoma. And U.S. Senator Jim Inhofe won another term. And we will talk to you again. We probably know a lot more an hour from now. So I hope to see you again at our 10 o'clock update. Thanks.